Neurotic Literature by James Lark. This story, The Perspex Vault. I was already in a bit of a rut when Cam decided to let me go. I suppose no agent drops a client when everything is going swimmingly, so it's in the nature of the role to kick men who are already down. But even so, it rankled. It burned. Partly because the rut was not, as she openly admitted, a creative decline. She'd be the first to say, indeed she was the first to say, that I was doing the best writing of my career. She actually continued to bandy the word genius about, even as she pushed across her desk the forms that would legally terminate our association. I know that she had a natural inclination towards hyperbole, but even so, that's like breaking up with someone at the same time as waxing lyrical about their unmatched beauty. Yes, I know people do that as well. Or so I've heard. Anyway, the writing was not at fault. It was everything else that had stagnated. It was a commercial rut, a rut of fading success. That was the furrow I was ploughing and which I had been stuck in for some time. A rut of sustained career failure that, one could argue, given the acknowledged quality of my writing, was more my agent's responsibility than my own. She was supposed to be driving my commercial momentum, wasn't she? I supplied the materials, the precious metals and the gemstones, and it was her job to craft them into a successful authorial career. To be honest, I should have been the one dropping her. She would have argued, as she often did, that I needed to focus not just on the quality of my writing, but on the audience for whom it was intended. "Bookshops put literary fiction in the corner for a reason, Ollie," she used to bark, albeit good-naturedly. "Write me a book they can put on those little tables in the middle, the ones with signs saying, 'This bookshop recommends.'" Which is what I had done. I had swallowed my pride. It took some bloody swallowing, though actually it wasn't pride, it was discernment, or perfectionism, or perhaps even snobbery. But whatever it was, I had swallowed it and embraced a more commercial subject matter, without, of course, compromising my high literary standards or ambitions. And it had worked. I had written a novel that might even come under the banner of genre fiction, which was nevertheless my finest achievement to date, an achingly beautiful piece of prose that could shift copies and win awards. A novel worthy of my agent's slightly careless label of genius. That's what I thought the meeting was going to be about. I continued to think it for an awful lot of the meeting too, because she took me to lunch first, and, for reasons that I suppose were motivated by kindness, didn't even mention the frankly enormous subject of discontinuing our professional relationship until we got back to her office. Then, with characteristic efficiency, she pushed a piece of paper across her desk, a piece of paper which I realised she must have prepared before I even turned up, and said, "Nobody wants this, I know, but I'm afraid now's the time we have to part company." Then, "Do you need to borrow a pen?" I looked at her, then down at the tiny, formal text swimming on the page in front of me, then back at the friendly but ruthless smile playing on her lips. "But," I began. "Don't draw it out, Ollie," she said with an impatient sigh. "We'd spent lunch talking about my new novel," I objected. "It's a wonderful piece of work, Ollie," she said. "Genius. And I can't sell it." "It's my best yet," I told her. "I agree," she said. "Just sign there." So there it was. My best work yet. Genius. And my agent eyeballing me in cold blood, refusing to do anything with it. Kicking me, after I had spent so many years down on the floor already, when I was honestly expecting to be lifted up by her and propelled out of my rut towards a fresh era of success. No wonder it rankled. Oh, but even that wasn't what burned, not really. What hurt the most, what was, right at that moment, sending a physical, searing pain through my chest, was the fact that it was her that put me here, who had got me into this in the first place. Cameron Rigby was her name, though she was always Cam, in the same way that she used 1- and 2-syllable variants of everyone else's name, as if worried that using more would slow her down. She was quite a legend in the publishing world. Most agents remain deliberately anonymous, shadowy entities pulling strings behind the scenes, but her eye for publicity, combined with a glamorous image and a string of success stories, had long since made her a public figure. She frequently popped up in the industry press and even national publications to offer her opinions and advice. How to get a literary agent, 10 do's and don'ts for wannabe authors, 19 debut novelists to watch in 2024, that kind of thing. Not that I knew it when I first met her. I didn't know anything much back then, apart from writing. It's hard to imagine a 17-year-old with a greater gap between their literary knowledge, gleaned from a life spent voraciously reading, and their practical understanding of the world, consciously left uncultivated through the eschewing of current affairs, popular trends, and all but the most unavoidable social interaction. Naive, unspoiled thing that I was, I assumed that our meeting was accidental, the kind of happy coincidence that takes place all the time in stories. What I realise now is that she tracked me down with the efficiency of a stalker. When I blame her for where I ended up, I'm not merely looking for a scapegoat. She trapped me, as deliberately as a hunter traps a wild animal. "A hunter traps a wild animal?" she would say. "Come on, Ollie, you can do better than that." I know I can, or at least I could have done once, but I'm too tired to come up with brilliant similes, especially when I know that nobody's ever going to read them. I don't blame her for that, by the way. My resentment is entirely reserved for her subsequent desertion. Hunting me down and making me an offer, that's just good agenting. I must have been on her radar for a while. I started writing stories the moment I could form words, and it wasn't long before I was winning prizes, initially in those school-oriented competitions that English teachers like to enter whole classes into in the hope that a couple of pupils might bag a book token and a certificate for a classroom display, but I took home so many of those that it began to draw attention. Before long I was being entered into competitions aimed at older pupils, then competitions beyond the realm of school altogether. I was 11 when I had a short story printed in a journal for the first time, 13 when I was included in a full-blown hardcover anthology, and my words were being read aloud to millions of BBC radio listeners by the time I was 16. At 17, I had written a novel and, because I remained wholly ignorant about the nature of publishing and the need for a literary agent, I entered it for the Gordon Benjamin Breakthrough Novel Award, competitions being about the only thing my well-meaning but hopeless school had been able to suggest as an outlet, and it was at the post-presentation reception that Cam Rigby threw herself at me, an intimidatingly gregarious apparition to a boy whose attention was mostly focused on trying to sip from a champagne flute without losing hold of a plate of canapés in his other hand and an award tucked under his arm. "Ollie Trimpton," she announced in her slightly American-sounding drawl, which may or may not have been an affectation. "As I live and breathe." Yes, I'm Oliver," I agreed. "You need an agent, Ollie," she said. "Do I?" I asked. I'm not sure. The prize included development of the novel with a publisher, so I guilelessly assumed I might be able to skip the need for an intermediary. "You're going to be a writer, aren't you?" she said, and she didn't say it like it was a question. "I don't know," I replied uncertainly, because I genuinely didn't. I haven't really thought about careers. I mean, I don't write for money, I write because I have to. And, I'm looking at English courses at the moment, so there are a lot of directions I could take once I've... I trailed off, unsettled by the intensity of her death stare. "English courses?" she echoed, letting the words hang for several seconds. "University?" I nodded. "Geez, Ollie," she sighed, "what can university teach you that you don't already know?" What I might now reply is that university could teach me a great many life skills, like how to organise a healthy working day, how to have a conversation at a formal dinner, what to do when your agent responds to a heartfelt work of both commercial and literary brilliance by dropping you. But at the time her words seemed to make a great deal of sense. I had an encyclopedic knowledge both of the classics and of contemporary fiction. My writing was advancing the more I exercised that muscle, and everything I created was going down incredibly successfully with important people. I was even making money from it now, and whilst you couldn't live on prize money, then it was enough to demonstrate the potential for my art to put food on the table. So why not become a writer? This lady seemed to know what she was talking about after all. "I get it, you'll want to shop around," she said. Will I wondered. "But keep me in mind. I'd love to work with you." She produced a card and, correctly sensing that a fourth object was going to be too much for my overburdened hands, she slid it into my trouser pocket. I don't know that she intended it to be a sexual move, but feeling the card slide down next to my leg and her fingernails lightly, if accidentally, brush against the very edge of my buttock was the most erotic thing that I had experienced outside the pages of fiction. And I was, after all, 17 years old. I could feel myself flushing, but worse than that, I had a horrible realization that my arousal was about to become even more obvious, so I turned away, mumbling excuses and apologies. I glanced back and she gave a little wave and a wink. "Call me when you're ready," she mouthed, as I tipped most of my drink over myself. It is a measure of my lack of imagination as far as real life was concerned that, from that moment on, I never considered any other option. In my fiction I had limitless capacity for invention. I could write about ordinary people and fill their lives with small triumphs and mundane failures that went far beyond my narrow experiences. I could write about outlandish worlds that didn't exist and populate them with a variety unlike anything on Earth. How pathetic that I couldn't even apply a fraction of that ingenuity to the situation I found myself in. I stopped looking at universities. What could they teach me? And I didn't shop around for agents. I had the details for one in my pocket. Why look further? Especially when the agent in question had been so, well, inspiring. It went well at first. Or did it? I remember a lot of lunches. She guided me through the possibilities for a debut author, suggesting some high-profile competitions here and there, getting me a steady flow of writing work for broadcast, and helping me gather together the best of my existing portfolio for an anthology of short stories, which she felt would be a publishing no-brainer once my first novel was out. She managed to bump up the development opportunity that came with the Gordon Benjamin Breakthrough Award to include a lucrative 3-book deal, which meant that income was not going to be a problem, and therefore enabled me to move into a flat of my own. I enjoyed the lunches, too. I didn't have any other social life to speak of, and Cam didn't talk only about my work and career. She was fun to be with, and occasionally introduced me to other fun people who I certainly wouldn't have met otherwise. I was usually a bit annoyed when these interlopers rocked up and she told them to pull up a pew, so that they somehow became part of our lunch plans as well. I much preferred it when it was just me and Cam. Look, I was an innocent, still a teenager at that time. Although Cam was a much older woman, she was stunning to look at and, at least as far as I was concerned, positively dripping with sexual appeal. Again, I wouldn't suggest that she was overtly flirting with me, but I had no experience to speak of elsewhere, so it's natural enough that she turned me on. Perhaps she enjoyed the intensity of my admiration, the way I clung to her words of wisdom and the big-eyed infatuation in my slightly too lingering looks. Which idol doesn't like a bit of worship? Though when on one occasion I made a clumsy attempt to take things to the next stage, she made her boundaries indelibly clear. "Whoa, Ollie," she said, "let's keep it professional." I remember abruptly whipping away my hand, the back of which she lightly stroked before withdrawing to a businesslike distance, an affectionate half-smile on her face. It was my novel that gave me the first hint that it was not going to be plain sailing. The thing was written, of course. It was that which had won me the prize and, by extension, the book deal. But the development process was laborious and painful. Quite where the publisher's influence ended, and Cam's input began is impossible to tell from this distance, but it felt as though there were a lot of voices involved, and they all had a particular view on what was needed to improve my novel. To make it, Cam kept saying, the best version of itself, or the you we need to introduce you to the public with. The public. They always seemed to be high on the agenda. Is this prose too dense for the readers? I'd be asked, and when I tentatively suggested that the readers I had in mind were more than capable of keeping up, I would be told to think about the readers I didn't have in mind. Should the material in chapters 4 to 7 be ordered chronologically to make them easier to follow, they suggested, and I explained that it wasn't meant to be easy to follow. Cam hooted with laughter. Welcome to publishing, honey! Then the copy editor and proofreader stuck their oars in as well. It isn't supposed to be a complete sentence, I would say, or it's not grammatically correct because it's dialogue and that's how the character speaks. But I was a lone, inexperienced voice, and the process almost seemed designed to wear me down. Eventually the novel was loosed upon the world. Blood-Dimmed Tides. Not my title, the name Oliver Trimpton in large gold letters on the attention-seeking hardback that lined bookshop windows for a very brief period. You might have read it, but it wasn't my novel. In all honesty, it bore shockingly little resemblance to what I had written originally. If it was more approachable, it was also more predictable. If it was more commercial, it was also more derivative. I did a short signing tour in a sort of daze, feeling fortunate when few members of the public turned up, because talking to people wasn't my strong suit, and whenever I was questioned about the novel, I couldn't help but sound disappointed in what it had become. An on-stage interview at a leading arts festival earned me a strict reprimand from the publisher. The worst thing was that the novel in its original form was... How can I say this without sounding arrogant? I can't, but it needs to be said. It was perfect. I don't mean it couldn't have been improved or enriched with the right input. I don't mean I wouldn't go on to write better. I simply mean that everything in it worked. Every paragraph, every word was part of a perfect construction, like the intricate, precise workings of a mechanical watch, in a way that the novel that eventually saw publication wasn't. I tried to make the point to Cam. "Oh, Ollie," she cried, "of course the original manuscript was perfect. That's why we had to work so hard to make it even perfecter." "But we didn't," I argued. "We did for the millions of people who were going to read it," she said, before adding, "well, hundreds." That's when she first gave me her spiel about literary fiction ending up in the corner of bookshops. "Is this how it's going to be?" I asked, unable to conceal my bitterness. "Compromise my writing for a place at the table?" "Ollie, I never want you to do that," said Cam. She came right up to me and cradled my face in her hands. "Do you hear me? I never want you to compromise anything, not a single word. What you've got is something so special. I don't want anything to mess that up, ever. I want the purest version of Oliver Trimpton that's in there." She gazed seriously at me, her face so close to mine that I thought for a moment that she was going to kiss me, before her hands dropped to her sides, and she took a step back, looking me up and down with what seemed like pride. "That's the Ollie Trimpton we fell in love with, right?" she said. "If anyone tries to make you compromise that, they'll have me to answer to." I wasn't quite so naive with the second novel. I'd been through the process once, and I knew what it would involve. If they were going to try and unpick it, I needed to make that impossible. I needed to construct it so deftly, so perfectly, that if they tried to move a single building block, the whole thing would come crashing down. I'd even say it did me a kind of favour. It made me more exacting, more obsessive than ever, and the novel that emerged was even more finely wrought than the first, a huge leap forward in the progression of my style. Not that I didn't absolutely earn it. I laboured as I had never laboured before. For 2 years I barely saw anyone and hardly ever left the house. Cam's lunches had rather dried up by that time in any case. I threw away far more than I kept. Those were the standards I had to keep, that if it didn't work completely, it didn't go in. because those were the standards I wanted to apply during any editorial process. They weren't going to destroy this one, I kept telling myself, because not only would they not be able to, they wouldn't want to. The real Oliver Trimpton. No compromises. And what I wrote was magnificent. "It's magnificent," breathed Cam. "Genius." The publishers agreed. "Their words," she said, pointing to an email from them. "Magnificent." But it was also, they explained, not compatible with their current output, and as such they were going to have to pass on it. They added that I was welcome to write something that was in line with their current output, but that if I preferred to continue on my current track and seek a different publisher for my unique talent, their words, said Cam, unique, they would not hold it against me, and would be happy to negotiate a solution to the outstanding expectations from my original 3-novel deal. "They're idiots," said Cam. "I guess we'll have to seek other publishers," I said. "Sure," said Cam, "that's one option." "What other options are there?" "You could write something more in line with, more—" She shrugged. "It's only another option. I'm throwing it out there. I know it's not what you— I could write bloody advertising slogans as well. Do you want that?" I shouted, and she told me to come back and discuss it in a few days' time when I'd calmed down. I went back a few days later and apologised. I was annoyed at the idea that my writing ought to be more commercial. Because that's what they mean, isn't it? They want me to churn out some generic crap, and you agreed with them. That's why I was annoyed. "I said it was an option, Ollie," Cam explained. "I wasn't saying it was a good option. I was laying out all the options. That's what agents do." "I know. Thank you. Sorry." "Look," she said, "you're not going to write generic crap." She looked at me with a flicker of uncertainty. "Are you?" I shook my head. "No, you're not," she said, nodding rapidly. "So here's what we do. I'm going to put everything I've got behind finding a publisher for this magnificent second novel of yours. And while I'm doing that, you are going to go away and write an even better one." She laughed suddenly. "You've thrown off that old book deal now, so that's kind of freeing, right? Now you can write whatever the hell you like." "I was doing that anyway," I pointed out. "Yeah, but now those shackles are really off," she said. "You could write anything." She put her hands on my shoulders and leaned towards me, so that her breasts were lightly resting on my chest. "You could even," she murmured, "finally write that bestseller for the tables in the middle of the bookshop." You get the impression. This went on for year after year, novel after novel. I refused to compromise any of my lofty ambitions, and as the success I had seen before dried up altogether, Cam urged and encouraged me to continue writing. Cam had salvaged enough of the 3-book advance to ensure that I wouldn't starve, and since I spent all day at my desk, it's not as if I had large outgoings. 3 microwave meals a day was enough to keep me going, and if that sounds a bit bleak, then do bear in mind that the frills of the outside world were mere distractions from the richness of the domain I created with my words. And this I must emphasise, my writing kept getting better. Each novel was more brilliant than the last. Cam agreed. "Absolutely exquisite," she would say, "not a single word out of place." But as the publishing climate was currently rather temperamental, and she was still struggling to find the right home for my genius, she thought it best that I started on the next one as she continued to try to place my work, always adding that perhaps now was the time to write with the "This Bookshop Recommends" table in mind, and reminding me that literary fiction ended up in the corner for a reason. So you can understand why I was so appalled, so utterly wounded by her ultimate bombshell when it came immediately after delivering what she had been asking for all that time. I stared at the piece of paper on her desk, the tiny words still failing to form into sentences, though in a way it hardly mattered. I had long since stopped being of any financial benefit to Cam, and it wasn't as if she was of any monetary use to me, so I was sure whatever I was about to sign would have no major adverse consequences. apart from the loss of an agent and the death of hope.
"You need a pen," Cam said. "Let me lend you a pen."
"I have done everything you asked me to," I said, my voice empty and hollow.
"You have," smiled Cam. "You've been absolutely wonderful, Ollie."
"I've written the book you asked for," I said. "The one for the tables in bookshops. You said it was genius."
"Oh, it is. It really is wonderful, Ollie."
"Then—" I waved my hand over the piece of paper in front of me. "What is this?"
"It's just time," she said. "Time we went our separate ways. Time for a fresh start. For both of us. Here you go. Here's a pen."
I stared at her. She was holding out a biro, still smiling, that same affectionate yet barbed mixture of the personal and the professional, the smile she'd been giving me throughout lunch. Why hadn't she told me this during lunch? Before lunch? Why the hell did she take me out to lunch at all? Something in me snapped. "Fine," I said, grabbing the biro and scribbling my signature. "I'll be better off without you anyway."
That's exactly what I was... A fresh start, both of us. There's a second copy underneath, if you could just...
I dashed off another signature and stood up, knocking my chair onto the floor with a clatter. "For what it's worth," I shouted, "I should have done this long ago, since you clearly haven't been doing a bloody thing for me since day one. Bloody nothing, except turn my first novel into a piece of—" I pointed my shaking finger at her fixed, quizzical smile. "I don't even know why you approached me in the first place, if all you were going to do was send me away to write novel after novel, which you do bugger all with, telling me that the industry is rather unsettled, when it's obvious now that you think my work is a load of crap." The smile on her face faltered and cracked. Suddenly she looked very tired and very old, almost her real age.
"Oh, Ollie, no, don't say that," she said, her usually strident voice suddenly hushed and emotional. "Don't ever say that, and don't let anyone tell you that. Your books are... They are wonderful, Ollie. They are streets ahead, cities ahead of anything else I read, in a whole different league to the very best of my other clients."
"Then why can't you get any of it published?" I almost screamed.
"Because the other authors won't let me!"
she almost screamed back, then collapsed into her chair as if all her magnificent energy had left her, as if she couldn't even sit upright anymore. She lazily, dismissively waved her hand.
"There, that's the reason. So let it go. Move on."
Slowly, I lifted the chair from the floor and placed it upright, then sat down. "What do you mean, the other authors?"
"Published authors," she said. "The ones in the bookshops."
"I'm a published author," I said.
You're not in the gang, not established."
"What gang? What do you mean they won't let you?"
"Move on, Ollie. You never made it into the circle. It's too late now."
"Won't let you?"
"It's a cruel business, and you're too good for it. That's all you need to—"
"Won't let you?
God damn it!" She slammed her hand down on the table with a huge bang. "Can't you let it rest?"
"I think I deserve an answer."
She sighed. "Writers are insecure creatures. You get that, right? Always worrying that they'll be overshadowed by somebody else, that their work will be pushed off the shelves by someone better, brighter, younger. I don't worry about that. You wouldn't, would you? You've got nothing to worry about. That's the point."
She gazed at me and shook her head in what appeared to be a kind of amazement.
"Oh, they've been worried about you for a long time, Ollie," she said. "I don't know when they noticed you, but those short stories attracted a hell of a lot of attention. And when word got out that you'd written a novel, well, from what I heard, it was full-on panic."
"Worried about what?" I asked, baffled.
"Come on, Ollie," said Cam. "Isn't it obvious? Nobody wants a genius on their patch."
"I wasn't on their patch," I protested. "I wasn't on any patch except my own. I was just writing."
"Their patch," Cam explained patiently, "is the time they live in, the now. Geniuses have a tendency to overshadow."
"Overshadow? I don't—"
"Name a single writer from Shakespeare's time. See if you can think of more than a handful of composers who were around when Mozart was alive."
"There's Marlowe," I said.
"Pah! Marlowe!" she spat, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You've read everything, and I bet even you haven't read Faustus."
"I have.
Really? Well, bits of it. I know the opera. You do, huh? Bits of it. Uh-huh. Ben Jonson. John Webster. Oh my God, Ollie. She shook her head. All right then, give me your favourite John Webster quotes. Go. Exactly. She leaned forward and said emphatically, 4-10. That's what happens when you have a Shakespeare on your doorstep. Or a Lawrence Sterne. Or an Oliver Trimpton. So the authors decided that rather than risk oblivion, they would ensure that anyone with overshadowing potential would be stopped. That publishers won't touch anything they consider too hot, too risky. Ensure? How? Oh, there's money involved, isn't there always? But I think that's more symbolic these days. It suits publishers to avoid any actual geniuses hitting the shelves. After all, they still have to sell all the stuff being written by non-geniuses, and there's a hell of a lot of that. Who are they? I asked in disbelief. They're all in on it, of course, muttered Cam. Oh, there's nothing formal, nothing written down. They wouldn't want anything you could actually point to and say, this is what's going on. But it is going on all the same, and once you reach a certain level, once your name's in print and you're definitely going somewhere, you kind of find out. And they make damn sure that by the time you find out, it's very much in your interest not to rock the boat. I don't think anyone really wants to anyway. Writers want to write, don't they? If there's an arrangement that makes the commercial side of things that bit easier, most of them are happy not to get too involved, to quietly let it happen. There are some who pretend to find it all a bit distasteful, but not one of them has spoken out about it. Cowards. Well, Neil Gaiman spoke out the one time, very, very quietly. But most people think that was a double bluff. She stood up and crossed to the window, I suspected so that she no longer had to meet my eyes while she unburdened herself. There are a few big names pulling a lot of strings. It only really works because there are people with influence making sure it does. Helen Fielding does a lot of the heavy lifting. She coordinates the others and issues threats if necessary, though I think Richard Osman's the main liaison with publishers these days, as they find him less intimidating. It helps to have a positive shop front, right? I couldn't believe how calm, how matter-of-fact her acceptance of all this was. A moment ago she had sounded weary, defeated, yet now she was talking with the same light, sarcastic tone she used to discuss any other publishing matter. I was almost gasping with indignation, but whether or not she sensed it, she didn't give me a chance to interject, with a characteristic barrage of information that laid out one horrific detail after another. Different writers keep an eye on the different genres. Obviously, authors are as territorial as they come. Mallory Blackman makes sure there aren't geniuses slipping in through teen fiction. Philippa Gregory does the same with historicals, and I think keeps one eye on chick lit, though they're less worried about geniuses turning up there. More Purgo's had a tight grip on children's for a while now, and Julia Donaldson keeps an absolutely ferocious rein on picture books. More than one publisher has woken up with a picture of a Gruffalo on their doormat. Threats, I echoed in disbelief, finally getting a word in. It doesn't usually go further than that, but don't underestimate them. There's a rumour that an agent got a little too close to getting a genius in print, and Sarah Waters broke both of their legs. I never saw any evidence, but a lot of authors were suddenly looking for new management. Some people say Ian McEwan puts coded intimidation in the text of the novels themselves. As for any fiction that might be coming into the LGBT+ category, you do not want to go there. That is an ugly battlefield right now. The corpses have been piling up. She glanced at me and must have caught sight of my face because she hastily added, metaphorical corpses, a clarification that completely failed to reassure when she frowned and muttered to herself, mostly anyway. And I inarticulately stuttered, the fury boiling up inside me, choking my words. They're deliberately perpetuating a culture of mediocrity. Hold on there, Ollie, said Cam, a warning note in her voice. She turned around properly and eyeballed me. I don't think any of those writers are mediocre, do you? No, but I'm not saying there isn't mediocrity, but they're not threatened by mediocrity. And they're not afraid of quality. They've been writing excellent fiction for a long time. There's plenty of room for that. The thing they won't tolerate, she looked at me meaningfully,
is full-blown, honest-to-God genius.
And you think I... Crying out loud, Ollie, I don't think it. Everybody thinks... No, damn it, everybody knows it.
She turned away again, her head bowed in an attitude of... what, shame? Or was it that there was nothing more to say? We stayed frozen like that for a while, a tense silence permeating the room. In some ways, the confirmation was comforting. I hadn't been imagining it. I was being deliberately sabotaged. And for the best possible reason, too. It was because I was such a good writer. But that wasn't comforting at all, was it? In fact, it was downright appalling. In an instant, my blood rose to the boil again. It's like, I spluttered. I'm a writer, not a speaker. It's like they put some kind of it's like a sodding glass ceiling is what it is. Cam snapped into life, shaking her head and tutting. Oh, no, you can't say that, Ollie. The glass ceiling is a barrier that impedes women and minorities. You're many things, Ollie, but you're definitely a white male. I'm still being impeded because of your talent, not because of who you are. You don't get to pretend to be in a minority. Even a minority of geniuses? Not in a disadvantaged minority, then. But I am being... I began, then gave up. Fine, I'll call it something else, then. It's a sodding... Perspex Vault. I like that. Perspex Vault. I like that. It's outrageous, I carried on. My whole career I've been hitting these walls, ceilings, whatever. The way it is, mused Cam, it's more like you're outside the vault. They've created a vault for themselves, locked themselves inside, haven't they? They've closed that big old vault door and left the real gold on the outside. Only they've shut everybody else in with them, so nobody else can get to the gold either. I meant vault as in ceiling. They can't do it. It's unethical. Oh, I'm not sure, Ollie. She frowned. Vault as in ceiling? That ambiguity does not help convey whatever this image is in your head. Come on, Ollie, you can do better than that. You're not taking me seriously, I yelled, like a child having a tantrum, and she looked at me like an unimpressed teacher. No, I'm not, she agreed. Should I be? Of course you should. This is an absolute scandal. It happens everywhere, Ollie, she said. It's not only literature. The musicians are all doing it now. Ever since Bowie died, they've been saying, never again, never another Bowie. It happens in art. It happens in theatre. It's happening in architecture. Seen any new buildings lately? Yes. Exactly. So what are we going to do about it? I'll tell you what we're going to do, she said, quietly, patiently. You're going to take that piece of paper you signed and walk out of here. I'm never going to see you in this room again, and we're both going to get on with our lives. So that's it then, I asked. You're completely resigned to them controlling me, controlling us in this way. Oh God, Ollie, she cried, I tried to help you. As soon as I saw what was happening, I got you on board, tried to get your first novel out in a way that didn't intimidate them. But your goddamn genius couldn't help creeping through, could it? Couldn't it? I thought back to my first butchered novel. The horrible compromise I had sworn would never happen again. Maybe it had been quite good after all. We did what we could to keep the sales low, stop people getting too interested. But the damage had been done, and you made it clear that you'd never let it happen again. And there you went, churning out genius novel after genius novel. I couldn't put them out, so I kept trying to persuade you to write something more derivative. You wouldn't have it, though, stubborn bastard that you are. She smiled at me with a wry but fond glint in her eye. I was paid a visit by Val McDermott. That's when I knew it was serious. She shuddered. I'm sorry. If I'd known, what could you have done? Cam smiled and put her hand on mine. You couldn't write genre fiction, not proper genre fiction that would sit on the shelf and not stand out. That's the irony. You've gone and proved it with your latest novel. A perfect piece of genre fiction and uncompromising literary genius. As soon as I read it, I saw there was nothing more I could do. But my mind was working fast. Now that I know, now that you've told me why, of course I could write genre fiction. Piece of cake. Nothing too ambitious, nothing too good. I couldn't do that to you, Ollie. It'd be an exercise in writing like less good authors. A bit of a challenge, to be honest. Where's the satisfaction for you in that? In selling yourself short? I don't mind, I insisted.
I'll sell myself short, if that's what it takes. They won't have it anyway. They'll assume you're trying to sneak in your literary fiction through the back door. Okay, I'll use a false name, I suggested. Come on, Ollie, do you think they're stupid? You can try to cover your tracks all you like. They've got Robert Harris and Len Dayton back-referencing contracts, and Pam Ayres checks the prose of debut authors for stylistic identifiers with a fine-tooth comb. You'd never get away with it. Fine, I said. America, then. Let's publish in America. They can't touch us there. Are you kidding? Exclaimed Cam. We've got nothing on America. US publishing is like frickin' gang warfare compared to what's happening here. She threw her hands in the air. You want to take on Danielle Steele, then be my guest, but you're on your own. All right, I said. I'll self-publish. The whole series. Run my own promotion campaign if necessary. I was growing desperate, I knew that, but I carried on talking while a rising hysteria carried into my voice. I'll blow the lid off this whole racket. I'll blog about it. I'll write a novel about it. I broke off and broke down, huddling in my chair, sobbing helplessly. Cam slowly walked towards me. She stood behind me and rested her arms on my shoulders, her hands falling lightly over my chest. She put her head next to mine, almost touching me. I could feel her breath hot on my cheek. Ollie, honey, she said gently, none of this makes you any less of a writer. I continued to weep, an ugly, uncontrollable reflex, as though all of the pent-up frustration that had been building over years of failure to make progress had finally emerged in the mixture of tears, dribble, and mucus dripping freely onto my trousers. You remember what you told me, she carried on, gently ignoring my feeble lamentation. Remember the first time we met? You told me you don't write for money. You said you write because you have to. She stroked my arm. So that's what you're doing from now on, right? Writing because you have to. Not for me, not for publishers, not for other readers. For yourself. I'm not sure that's enough anymore, I whispered, the words choked by the lump in my throat and the endless despair that I seemed to be staring down. Of course it is, she said. Now, she stood up, allowing one hand to brush my face before she stepped away. You need to leave. Can't I stay and talk? Not about books, just can't I stay for an hour or two, just there watching the building, Ollie? Zadie Smith's been parked opposite since before lunch. She needs to see you walk out of here without an agent or we're both in serious trouble. So take this, she put a copy of the paper I had signed in my hand, and walk out of here looking as angry and betrayed as you feel. Can you do that? I turned a tear-streaked face towards her. Oh yeah, not a problem, she said. And was there a trace of guilt in her crooked smile? Or was it relief? Then she physically lifted me up by the arms, turned me round, and pushed me towards the door. I let my legs propel me, barely able to see where I was going through the blur of tears. Oh, and Ollie. I stopped and I heard her walk towards me. There is no need for professional boundaries anymore, not now that I'm no longer representing you, so if you did feel like exploring that option now. I felt her card slide into my pocket, and in spite of myself, my body responded in the usual way, which made the walk out of her office even more undignified. I stepped into my house, my empty house. It literally was empty, I realized, except for the books lining every wall, but even they felt meaningless after what had happened. What did other people have in their houses? Things to cook with, build with, games to play, ornaments? I had so little besides the books. Why had I never noticed that my house was so empty? Probably because I spent so much of my time at my desk and filled every day with words. But I couldn't do that anymore. Could I? Writing for myself. Words, sentences, paragraphs, stories that nobody else in the world would ever see. Maybe one day. What if I were to bury them all in a lead-lined box in the garden, a time capsule hidden from the interference of other living authors?
Perhaps a future generation would discover my writing, and perhaps the brilliant words of a dead author would be of less worry to them than the brilliant words of a living one. And if nobody found them? That would be all right, wouldn't it? I'd still be writing. I always wrote for myself, after all. Because I had to. I pushed the door of my office open. It seemed smaller than before. Like the rest of the house, it looked empty. I walked slowly to my desk, sat down and gazed at the notepad that was lying there expectantly. Blank. An empty page. There were, of course, other options. I had only ever experienced a life of writing, but there were things beyond that narrow world. I could learn a musical instrument, play sports. I could... What do other people do? Watch television. Go out for dinner. I enjoyed my lunches with Cam, didn't I? And there were sometimes other people there, other people I could have lunch with when Cam wasn't available for lunch. Perhaps now I would have a lot more time for that kind of thing. I supposed that, as well as new ways of spending leisure time, I would have to get some kind of job. Now that I knew for certain that I wasn't going to make money from writing, it would be imprudent to sit around waiting for the book deal advance to run out. I would need to find new ways of earning. Data entry, perhaps. Or shelf stacking. I could drive a lorry, or get a job in cyber. Why stop at one job for that matter? I could try lots of jobs, take a wander down all kinds of career paths. It would be an experience. I put my hand in my pocket and pulled out Cam's card. I couldn't help but smile when I thought of her slipping it in there, her proposal. I was no longer a young man, but there was still an awful lot I hadn't experienced. And Cam, although well past the prime of her youth, was... well, she was Cam. I liked Cam, or at least I enjoyed having lunch with her, which was a good start. With no professional boundaries to stop us, we could... well, the exact details of what she was suggesting were still mysterious to me, but there would be plenty of time to explore that. Why not? Why, for that matter, stop at Cam? There were plenty of other fish in the sea, weren't there? I wasn't really in touch with anyone, not right at that moment, but now there was time to put feelers out. I could think of a few girls at school I'd found potentially attractive, or would have done had I had the time to follow those feelings to any kind of conclusion. There were dating apps, websites, singles clubs and bars. Why settle for Cam when I could go out and meet all manner of women and... yes, why not? Men. And because the world didn't feel the need to stop at two genders, why on earth should I? The salty sheen that I had left caking my face seemed to crack and flake as I involuntarily broke into a broad, euphoric grin. I had the freedom to explore a whole new realm of possibilities. Any number of people and places, customs and cultures. There was a world full of food and drink to sample, music to listen to, clothes to wear, buildings and landscapes to marvel at, towers and mountains to climb, rivers and seas to swim, sail or drown in, jobs to take on and to walk out of, successes and failures to unswervingly commit to. And people. So many people. People to laugh with, argue with, have sex with, fall in love with, fight with, to talk with, long into the long nights ahead of me, the endless nights, so empty, yet so full of potential. Still grinning from ear to ear as my head filled with ideas, I picked up my pen and began to write. You have been listening to Neurotic Literature, written and performed by me, James Lark. That was the last in the current series, but if you enjoyed it, there are 15 other stories that you can also enjoy, so why not explore those? There is also another series coming up. Oh yes, I have been writing. So that is something that you can look forward to. If you would like to support the podcast in the meantime, you can do it in several ways. Most importantly, let people know about it. Please do tell your friends, tell your family, tell people you don't know at all on social media. Spread the word, because the more listens that this gets, the more likely I am to actually get on and record the next bundle. You could also write a review on your podcast platform of choice. That's very much appreciated. It all helps to drive more people towards it. You can also support the podcast financially if that's your thing, and the place to do that is ko-fi.com, that's ko-fi.com/neurotic literature. If nothing else, just pop on and leave a nice comment, because if there's one thing that's nearly as good as feeding a writer, it's feeding a writer's ego.